You know that feeling when a room goes quiet and suddenly everyone looks your way? Not because you shouted, but because you didn't. In a world obsessed with noise, likes, shares, stories, statuses, we've forgotten the oldest form of power: silence. Not the passive kind, not the fearful retreat, but the kind of silence that radiates presence, that commands attention without seeking it. We live in times where being visible seems to equal being valuable, where we're told to be transparent, authentic, expressive at all costs. But that cost is rarely counted, because every word you speak ties you to something: a belief, a position, a version of yourself you might outgrow by next week. Machiavelli knew better. While others talked themselves into trouble, he mastered the art of saying only what was necessary, and never more than that. He didn't just write about politics, he wrote about perception, about how silence isn't a void, it's a force, a shape-shifting weapon in the hands of someone who knows when to hold it. And in a world oversaturated with opinions, the person who says less becomes more powerful, more unpredictable, more respected, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know not everything deserves. They tell you to speak up, to share your truth, to never leave things unsaid. But they rarely warn you about the trap hidden in speech, because every word you offer isn't just a sound, it's a signal, a breadcrumb others can follow, a commitment you may not be ready to keep. And once it's out, you can't take it back. Words live in the minds of others, shaped by their interpretations, not your intentions. Machiavelli lived in a world of backroom deals and sudden betrayals, where a single misplaced sentence could cost you power, status, or your life. Today, the stakes may seem lower, but the consequences remain. Speak too soon, and you reveal your plan. Speak too often, and you dilute your impact. Speak too much, and people stop listening altogether. Every declaration creates friction. You say you'll do something, then feel obligated to follow through, even when the path changes. You explain your thinking and give others the blueprint to manipulate it. You defend yourself and legitimize attacks that might have faded if ignored. That's the cost of unnecessary speech, and it's higher than most realize. The person who always feels the need to explain, to clarify, to be understood, they give others power. They become easy to read, easy to predict, easy to control. But the one who can stay quiet, who can absorb without reacting, builds an edge no one can quantify. This isn't about fear. It's not about avoidance. It's about restraint, the kind of restraint that signals control, discipline, authority. While others rush to fill silence with noise, the Stoic waits, listens, observes, because only through observation can we act with precision. As Machiavelli knew, people judge with their eyes, not their hands. They notice what you project, not what you feel. And silence, when wielded deliberately, projects something stronger than any speech could: unshakable presence. The kind that makes others lean in, not because you demanded attention, but because you didn't. There's a strange kind of freedom in not declaring. When you don't announce your intentions, you're not locked into them. You're free to pivot, to reassess, to grow. You can move without broadcasting, change without explanation, act without permission. But the moment you speak, you surrender some of that freedom. Say, I'm going to do this. And suddenly, that becomes part of your identity in the eyes of others. Backtrack, and you're labeled inconsistent. Stay silent, and you owe no justification to anyone. Machiavelli understood this power well. He knew that speech isn't just a form of expression, it's a form of exposure. And exposure invites scrutiny. People dissect your words, interpret your tone, read into your pauses. Even honesty becomes ammunition in the wrong hands. So why volunteer it? The Stoic mind asks a different question. What outcome does this speech serve? If it's to be understood, why? If it's to justify, to explain, to defend, what are you really defending? Your truth or your ego? Because often we talk not to communicate, but to relieve discomfort. The discomfort of not being seen, not being heard, not being validated. But comfort built on constant validation is fragile. It makes us dependent on others for stability. We should be able to hold ourselves. And what happens when they stop listening? Strategic silence, by contrast, is self-reliant. It draws its strength not from being noticed, but from being intentional. It allows you to watch while others reveal, to stay grounded while others scramble, to adapt without needing to announce every step of your evolution. You don't need to explain every move to earn respect. In fact, the more you explain, the more people expect explanations. And eventually, your words lose weight. They become background noise. But when you speak rarely and with purpose, people pay attention. They lean in because now your silence means something. And when you finally choose to speak, your voice carries the weight of restraint, the authority of someone who doesn't speak to be heard, but to be. He walks into a room and says nothing. Still, people notice, not because he demands it, but because he doesn't. There's something about someone who doesn't feel the need to speak, who sits calmly while others rush to fill the air, who listens without interrupting, observes without reacting. In that stillness, there is weight, mystery, authority. Machiavelli understood this well. He believed that power was not just in the lion's strength, but in the fox's cunning. And one of the fox's sharpest tools was knowing when speech makes you weaker, not stronger. In every domain, the most powerful figures speak the least. They don't offer opinions on every issue. They don't chase validation through words. When they finally speak, it's not to contribute to noise, but to cut through it. Think about it. The CEO who delivers only a few decisive words in a meeting, the mentor who stays silent through your rant, then offers a single sentence that shifts your whole perspective. The leader who doesn't justify every decision, but lets the results speak for them. Their restraint is not absence, it's presence. Because when you don't overshare, people fill in the gaps. They project wisdom onto you. They wonder what you know that they don't. And that mystery makes your presence heavier, your aura stronger. But speak too much, and you remove the veil. You expose every thought, every hesitation, every flaw. You make yourself ordinary, and the ordinary cannot lead the extraordinary. This isn't about manipulation, it's about self-respect. When you speak with intention, you teach others that your words are valuable. When you stay silent at the right moment, you create a contrast, a tension that makes people pay attention. In a world addicted to over-explaining, oversharing, and over-explaining again, the person who speaks with quiet certainty stands apart. Not because they are louder, but because they don't need to be. And in that space between what people see and what they cannot grasp, your authority grows, not from what you say, but from everything you choose not to say. The best negotiators don't win with words. They win with silence, not the kind that retreats, but the kind that waits, that watches, that lets the other side reveal too much just to fill the space. There's a reason why in every negotiation playbook, the rule is clear. Whoever speaks first loses. It's not just about tactics, it's about control. Because silence unsettles people. Most are uncomfortable with it. They'll rush to explain, to soften the pause, to make sure the moment doesn't stretch too long. And in doing so, they give up more than they intend. Machiavelli would see this not as awkwardness, but as opportunity. Let them talk. Let them show their hand. Let them expose their fears, their desires, their bottom line, while you say nothing. In relationships, the same principle holds. The one who listens more, understands more. The one who speaks less, surprises more. Because when you're not constantly expressing, people lean in. They begin to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you already know. And when they guess, they reveal. In social dynamics, silence creates asymmetry. You observe without exposing. You learn without announcing. You enter the room not to perform, but to perceive. And that perception sharpens your decisions. While others move emotionally, you move precisely. The person who reveals every plan, every frustration, every strategy before acting rarely achieves what they're capable of. Not because they lack talent, but because they gave others too much time to react. Strategic silence delays exposure. It forces the world to respond to your moves, not your intentions. And once your move is made, it's too late to stop it. This is not manipulation, it's discipline. Because silence, when mastered, doesn't just hold space, it controls it. And in every interaction, from boardroom to conversation, the one who controls the space control. Most people fear silence. They think it means something is wrong, that they're being judged, that they're losing control of the conversation. But silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence, a deeper, quieter form of awareness, one that Machiavelli would have recognized as the real battlefield, not of words, but of minds. Psychologically, silence holds immense power. It creates a void, an empty space that the human mind can't resist filling. And what it fills it with often says more about the other person than it does about you. They project their hopes, their doubts, their guilt, their fears onto your silence. And while they're busy revealing themselves, you remain still, grounded, watching. That's why interrogators use silence to make people speak more than they intended. Why skilled negotiators tolerate long pauses until the other side folds. Why some of the most powerful leaders in history spoke less than their peers, but were heard far more clearly. Because silence forces others to sit with themselves, and most people can't. They'll rush to close the gap, to explain, to justify, to seek approval. But the one who stays still, who resists that urge, signals something rare, self-possession. In conflict, this becomes even more powerful. When attacked, the instinct is to defend, to fight back, to speak your truth. But sometimes, silence lands harder than any comeback. It shows the attack didn't shake you, that it wasn't worth your energy, that your power doesn't depend on their validation. People expect noise. They're trained to react to it. But silence throws off the rhythm. It shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, you're not playing the same game. You're not trying to win the argument because you're already beyond it. In that space of stillness, a new kind of respect emerges. One that doesn't demand acknowledgement, but naturally commands it. Because silence in its purest form isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of strength. Most people never notice the quiet ones winning because the world is too busy applauding the loud, the expressive, the outspoken, the relentlessly visible. But real power, lasting power, rarely announces itself. It moves with intention, waits without insecurity, acts without explanation, and then disappears again, having shifted the outcome without claiming credit. That's the legacy of strategic silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but of awareness. Of knowing that not everything deserves your energy. Not every battle needs your sword. Not every thought is worthy of being spoken. Machiavelli was misunderstood not because he was wrong, but because he saw too clearly. He knew that force wasn't the only path to power. Sometimes influence is quiet, subtle, invisible, and sometimes the one who says the least shapes the most. In a time when the algorithm rewards attention and the culture celebrates constant output, you reclaim your sovereignty by choosing restraint, by letting your actions whisper what your words never could. Speak when it builds, speak when it serves, but do not speak just to be seen, because the ones who speak only when necessary are remembered more deeply than the ones who never stop talking. The Stoics taught us to live aligned with virtue, with discipline, with presence. Machiavelli showed us how silence, when guided by wisdom, can be a tool, not just of protection, but of transformation. So here you are, faced with a choice in every moment, to say what feels urgent or to hold what is essential, to chase visibility or to preserve clarity, to react or to remain rooted. This is the quiet revolution, the slow, deliberate reclaiming of your power, not by proving yourself to the world, but by no longer needing to. Because in the end, the most unshakable presence is built not on how much you say, but on how well you choose what not to.